So this is it. Happy Easter. We've been preparing for this day, doing a series kind of from Luke 9 through 19, maybe a little bit more than that, but a season of Jesus' life where he resolutely sets out for Jerusalem, knowing that he's going to accomplish the Father's purpose through his death and resurrection. As he's in that season, as he's in this time, his focus is revealed in Luke chapter 19 to seek and to save the lost. As we see Jesus in this season, we've been looking at encounters that he had, whether it was with Mary or the sick or Zacchaeus or the disciples in the triumphal entry or the disciples in the garden. The purpose of God, his desire to seek and save the lost, comes out in all of them. So there's things that we can learn. So last week we ended in the garden, the betrayal in the garden. This week we will pick up with what happened. There were trials and accusations and more shouts towards Jesus. But then he was ultimately crucified on the cross, dying a criminal's death. Two other men, both criminals, were also led out with him to be executed. When they came to the place called the skull, they crucified him there along with the criminals, one on his right, the other on his left. Jesus said, "Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing." They divided up his clothes by casting lots. The people stood and watching, and the rulers even sneered at him. They said, "He saved others, let him save himself. He's God's Messiah, the chosen one." Soldiers came up, they mocked him. They offered him wine vinegar and said, "If you're the king of the Jews, save yourself." There was a written notice above him which read this: "This is the King of the Jews." One of the criminals who hung there hurled insults at him. "Aren't you the Messiah? Save yourself and us." But the other criminal rebuked him. "Don't you fear God," he said. "Since you're under the same sentence, we're punished justly for what we're getting what our deeds deserve. But this man has done nothing wrong." He said, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." And Jesus answered him, "Truly, I tell you, today you'll be with me in paradise." It was about noon, and darkness came over the whole land until 3 p.m. The sun stopped shining, and the curtain of the temple was torn in two. Jesus called out with a loud voice, "Father, into your hands I commit my spirit." When he said this, he breathed his last. But we know that the story doesn't just stop with the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. We have Luke chapter 24. In Luke 24, there's 3 encounters with the resurrected life, or with the resurrection of Jesus Christ. The first one, there are some women that have been waiting to go put some herbs on Jesus's body in the tomb. They had to wait till after the Sabbath, so they went to put herbs on his body, perfume on his body. And when they arrived, he wasn't there. There were 2 men who were like angels that stood there, and they were confused. They didn't know what was going on. The angel began to tell them what was going on. And Scripture says that they remembered his words. When they remembered the words, the women ran to tell the 11 disciples what had happened. But the disciples could not understand them because they thought they were speaking nonsense. There's another encounter that happens with the disciples, following the one I want to focus on today. As we approach Easter, I want to look at the narrative of the disciples on the road to Emmaus. I believe it's a narrative that many of us can relate to. That same day, 2 of them were going to a village called Emmaus. It was about 7 miles from Jerusalem. They were talking with each other about everything that happened. As they talked and discussed these things with each other, Jesus himself came up and was walking along with them. But they were kept from recognizing him. He asked them, "What are you discussing together as you walk along?" They stood still, their faces downcast. One of them, named Cleopas, asked him, "Are you the only one visiting Jerusalem who doesn't know the things that have happened there in these days?" "What things?" he asked. "About Jesus of Nazareth," they replied. "He was a prophet, powerful in word and deed before God and all the people. The chief priests and our rulers handed him over to be sentenced to death. They crucified him, but we had hoped that he was going to be the one who would redeem Israel. And what is more, it's the 3rd day since all this took place. In addition, some of our women amazed us. They went to the tomb early this morning. They didn't find his body. They came and told us they'd seen a vision of angels who said he was alive. And some of our companions went to the tomb. They found it just as the women had said, but they did not see Jesus." He said to them, "How foolish are you? How slow to believe all that the prophets have spoken. Did not the Messiah have to suffer these things, then enter his glory?" And beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he explained to them what was said in all the Scripture concerning himself. As they approached the village to which they were going, Jesus continued on as if he were going farther, but they urged him strongly, "Stay with us, for it's nearly evening. The day is almost over." So he went to stay with them. When he was at the table with them, he took bread. He gave thanks. He broke it and gave it to them. Their eyes were open. They recognized him. He disappeared from their sight. They asked each other, were not our hearts burning within us while he talked to us on the road and opened the scriptures to us? They got up. They returned at once to Jerusalem. There they found the 11 and those with them assembled together and saying, it is true, the Lord has risen and has appeared to Simon. Then the two told what had happened on the way and how Jesus was recognized by them when he broke the bread. I know this is a long passage for an Easter Sunday, but it's a great story. It's one of my favorite stories in Scripture. We've got this cast, these two disciples, and we don't know anything really about them except for the one's name, Cleopas. I read one commentary that kind of even hypothesized this was intentional so that we could kind of put ourselves in this story. Anyway, what do we know about them? We know that they were in Jerusalem, likely for the Passover. They heard about Jesus. They could have witnessed his entry, but they heard about him and all that was taking place, but they left town confused because of the events of the week. They head home and they began to discuss all that was taking place. Have you ever been in a situation where the events didn't play out the way you thought they were going to? And after the event, you left to kind of process everything, the reality of your expectation between what actually happened. These disciples, they're like the majority of the Jews. They pictured the coming Messiah would look a whole lot different than it did. They begin to ask Jesus, don't you know what's taken place on the road? What things, he asked. Remember Jesus of Nazareth, they replied. He was a prophet, powerful in word and deed before God and all the people. The chief priests and our rulers handed him over to be sentenced to death. They crucified him. We had hoped he was the one who was going to redeem Israel. And what is more, it's the third day since all this took place. They had an understanding of who Jesus was. He was powerful. He was a prophet. He was the one who was coming to redeem Israel. He said something about the third day. So we hung around on the third day waiting to see what would happen, but nothing happened. They heard the woman's story about going to the tomb and the body being gone, but it didn't make sense. Why? Because Rome was still ruling, and this is not what they were expecting. They had hope. It's kind of like when you go to the football game and your team has been scored all day. They're down 10 in the fourth quarter, and at some point you decide to leave to beat the traffic. I know how the story ends, right? These guys said, it's getting dark and we've got to travel 7 miles. It's dangerous to travel at night. It's been almost 3 full days since this took place. It's just time to go home and be safe. They were apparently aware of Jesus' predictions. 3 days, something was going to happen. They seemingly given up hope and decided to return. They didn't understand. That's why I can relate to this story so well. Sometimes in life, I'm walking and talking, but I just don't understand. But what did Jesus do as they were walking and talking? Scripture says not only did he walk with them, but he came up to them. He approached them in their confusion. He approached them in their misunderstanding, and he began to walk with them in the midst of confusion, in the midst of doubt, maybe sometimes in the midst of their defeat. Jesus, he came and he walked with them. That's someone's message for today, that Jesus wants to walk with you in the midst of your doubt, in the midst of your confusion, in the midst of your not knowing. He just wants to walk with you for a while. The irony of the story. What are you talking about? Are you not the only one, they say, in all of Jerusalem who doesn't know what happened there? The irony is Jesus is the only one in all of Jerusalem who truly comprehends all that has happened there. They were expecting the Messiah to come in victory and power and authority. The Messiah came. He died on the cross. He achieved the victory that his Father intended through his death, and he demonstrated through his resurrection that death was defeated, but no one could understand. Jesus looks at these men and he says, how foolish are you? How slow of heart to believe. This term in the Greek, it portrays more than an intelligent or intellectual dullness. It denotes a culpable failure of a perceived spiritual reality. It's already been made clear. The expectation was that in the Gospels, he often says, there are those who have eyes, but they cannot see. This is something that's before them, but they're not perceiving it. They're slow in their heart to believe. Slow to believe. Slow in their heart to believe. They were aware. They knew what Jesus did, but we're slow to comprehend that heart thing. It's not just this beating in us. It's the whole interior life, the thinking, the feeling, the choosing. But Jesus, knowing this, continued to walk with them. Beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he explained to them all the scripture that pertained to himself. Sometimes we're slow to believe because we're only looking at a part of the truth. That word all, it's important. Jesus showed these disciples where the story, the fulfillment was in all things. The disciples had this perspective of Jesus Christ coming and winning and doing all these great, incredible things, but they missed the portions where it talked about his suffering, his death. He had prophesied several times, even when he was with his disciples, I will die and on the third day rise again. But they could not see, they could not hear, they could not comprehend what he was saying. They come to the end of their journey. Jesus is going to continue on. The disciples say, no, stay with us. They come to the table. Jesus breaks bread with them. He gives thanks. Their eyes were opened and they recognized him. And he disappears from their sight. That's the power of an encounter with the resurrected Jesus. They were at the table with him. He broke bread with them, and they began to fully comprehend all that he did. Weren't our hearts burning within us while he talked on the road? He opened the scripture to us. They returned at once to Jerusalem. They found the 11 and those with them assembled together and said, it's true, the Lord has risen and appeared to Simon. Then they told the two what had happened on the way and how the two told them what happened on the way and how Jesus was recognized by them when they broke bread. Look at the transformation of life. They left Jerusalem because of the fear of night, the danger of night. They experienced the resurrected Jesus, and all of a sudden, their understanding caused them to live with a boldness and a power they didn't have before. Even though it was darker now, they went back to Jerusalem to tell the 11, to tell someone about the resurrected Jesus. I want to tell you that Jesus Christ wants to walk with you where you are. If you're confused, if you're wondering, if you're just not sure of this whole story, but as you hear this story, the reality that God sent his son, Jesus Christ, to die an atoning death, to die a death that would bring forgiveness for your sin. We've all sinned, fallen short of the glory of God. We've put ourselves in a place that we're destined to die, an eternal death. That's forever separation from God. But God loved us enough to send Jesus, and he died on the cross. He rose again, showing his victory over that death. When you hear those words, is there not something burning within you? Walk with Jesus for a little while. Let him begin to unpack his scriptures and bring revelation to your eyes so that you can see and understand. The Lord bless you and keep you. May he make his face shine upon you, be gracious to you, may turn his face towards you, grant you his peace, and may you experience the resurrected Jesus Christ who brings the fullness of understanding. Be blessed.